Okay, welcome back, class, to the lecture, and we'll be continuing where we left off, and we'll be talking about automobile dependency. So, for the time being, we have talked about in the previous lecture as well that people have why people chose to have their own cars because it is provides good mobility, comfort, speed. It serves as a status symbol, and most of all, it's very convenient to use. And especially in the world it has been increased and it has its pros and cons already, and most people will prefer to use their own automobile if given choice and opportunity. So why do we use it? Well, uh, because of the complex development patterns and complex individual movement patterns, the transit systems cannot keep up to it, right? They cannot keep meet up with the demand of this mobility and accessibility choices. Automobile people have, consequently, people have turned to using their own automobiles because it would provide them uh, better mobility and accessibility to different places. And sometimes it can be perceived as a positive indicator for economic development, and it is often taken as a good way of judging an economic status. If you're talking about, let's say, I'm talking about doing some kind of economic development assessment of an area, then I take that if a household have their own car, for example, then they are economically they are more secure as compared to the people who do not have means of transportation, and that it has emerged as a factor for your economic growth. Uh, Sorry. Yeah. Mm, So yeah, uh, it has emerged as a factor of your economic growth and your job creation, and people are relying on it. And ultimately, what has happened over time that people have started relying it upon it too much. Uh, so it depends upon the government's approach whether they are uh, promoting road development or public transit development. And of course, that has their own dilemmas that why governments choose this and that. Okay, what are the factors which contributes to automobile dependence? Well, the first of all is that we are saying that road infrastructures we develop it, we promote it in the name of public good. And road infrastructure using a road has uh, almost negligible taxes, I would say, that people are using roads with no consequences, and that is deteriorating the roads, and that will ultimately your government's administration would need to rebuild it. And we are in this context, we have already subsidized it. We have already provided a resource free so that can be used over time. And that's also again the people also prefer to use cars because of freedom and prestige. So this ultimately increases your automobile dependency in a city. Then is your single home ownership, in which people are now trying to live in the outskirts, in the suburban areas. That is reinforcing the need for automobile dependency because your public transit cannot cater to the transportation needs of the suburbs. So single home ownership, because of the trend has been changing to single home or single family dwelling, automobile has become a part of that dream, I would say. And then is your planning and investment practices. How we are going to be utilizing the public funds to build road or parking facilities that would ultimately increase your automobile dependency. Uh, some other factors would be like policies, which ultimately uh, give you transport option, land use patterns, and then these two things will generate travel activities. And of course, those will have some kind of social and environmental impacts. But let's visit about the why your we are stuck in cycle of automobile dependency. First of all, we have let's talk about increased vehicle ownership. We have high number of vehicle ownerships. That is why we go for automobile-oriented development planning. When we have automobile dependent or automobile oriented, then options will be limited and alternative modes will be stigmatized. Like we all and we are seeing in case of Pakistan, when we talk about that, why don't you use public transport? No, the public transportation is not good. It's not adequate. It's not proper. So we are stigmatizing our own public transportation systems. And ultimately, suburbanization will help, will go on, and that will generate again land use planning according to automobile. And when we are giving automobile, obviously we'll be developing some kind of parking spaces, parking supply. And by providing parking spaces, it is now debatable. Some students or some planners, I would say that is parking, should we give parking or should we not give parking? That is the debate among the planners. Like some people say that no, parking should be given. No, I would like your opinion first, class. Do you think parking should be given or should not be given? Let's say talking about a commercial markets or commercial centers, should we encourage buildings, commercial buildings to provide parking spaces or not? What do you say? Plus, I would like your participation now. Should we give parking to the people coming to commercial buildings or plazas or not? Yes, Hamza, please.
यस सर, मेरे ख्याल में पार्किंग होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि अब अगर आप जिस तरह बात करें ना कि इस तरह अगर हम पार्किंग ना दें तो ऑटोमोबाइल्स की कमी हो जाएगी, मतलब लोग डिस्करेज हो जाएंगे यूज़ करने से। लेकिन एग्जिस्टिंग ऑटोमोबाइल्स हैं तो सही सिस्टम के अंदर, उनके लिए आपको सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड तो करनी पड़ेंगी। और ऑब्वियसली मार्केट के सेंस में तो आपका जो बिजनेसमैन है वो तो कंपटीशन देखता है कि मेरे साथ वाली मार्केट वाला दे रहा है तो अब मुझे भी देना ज़रूरी है, अदरवाइज कंपटीशन बन जाएगा ना। जो ज़्यादा सहूलत देगा तो कस्टमर उसके पास जाना चाहेगा। तो और दूसरा सिस्टम के अंदर ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्ट कर रही हैं ऑटोमोबाइल्स, तो आपको मेरे ख्याल में तो देना ज़रूरी है।
Okay, that's fine. That is truly understandable. That is, I respect your opinion. Everyone is right. So yes, your point is very valid. That giving an options to customer really helps in attracting a customer. Yes, Alia, what's your point?
Sir, I would agree with Hamza. I think parking spaces देनी चाहिए, but ये हो सकता है कि हम थोड़ी distance पे दे दें parking spaces rather than exact जो आपकी commercial activity जहाँ पे है वहाँ पे, like जैसे plaza बन जाता है something। राजा बाजार में जिस तरह से उन्होंने जो था वो एक अलग totally पूरा एक plaza की building बना दी थी and people had to walk, जितनी भी उन्होंने मार्केट एक्सप्लोर अगर करनी होती थी, जाना होता था, तो उस तरह से आपका रश जो होता था वो कम हो जाता था। इवन गाड़ियों का मतलब जो होता था पहले, वो उनकी प्रॉब्लम सोल्यूशन उसकी ये थी। तो आई थिंक दैट्स अ गुड सोल्यूशन।
Yes, that's a very valid opinion. Yes, Rizwan, you wanted to say something? Or
एग्जैक्टली सर, मैं भी ये कहना चाहता हूँ, मैं हमजा की बात से सहमत हूँ कि लाइक हमारे सिस्टम में क्योंकि अभी गाड़ियाँ तो हैं ना, तो उसके मुताबिक अगर देखा जाए तो हम लोग को ये फैसिलिटी देनी चाहिए कि पार्किंग की फैसिलिटी हो। ठीक है, और मेरा यही कहना होगा कि कमर्शियल की जो भी कमर्शियल बिल्डिंग्स वगैरह हैं इन्हीं के अंदर लाइक बेसमेंट्स में हो, यानी अपने इधर, क्योंकि हमारा सिस्टम ही ऐसा बन चुका है कि हम लोग को उधर ही एक्सेस वगैरह सब चीज़ें ये देनी पड़ती।
okay, good point, good point. Ayam, please.
सर मेरे ख्याल से जो हमारे पास नेबरहुड में जो मार्केट्स होती हैं उनमें हमें पार्किंग को डिस्करेज करना चाहिए सर, क्योंकि जो वॉकिंग डिस्टेंस पे मार्केट्स है वहाँ पे भी हमने पार्किंग दी हुई, तो लोग जो है ना 2 मिनट के डिस्टेंस में भी गाड़ियाँ लेके जाके कुछ चीज़ें लेकर आते, लाइक छोटी मोटी चीज़ें। और इंकरेज हमें मेन मार्केट्स में करनी चाहिए जो हमसे दूर है, लाइक शॉपिंग प्लाजा और CBDs में।
Okay. So yes, your point, all your points are valid, and that is true, and that is different approaches being used. So I'll give you the both pictures. Like if you are saying that okay, because to accommodate the current demands, we need to provide parking spaces, and according to our building bylaws, we are saying that I think 1,000 square foot if area is there, then you need to provide one car. So depending upon this law, I'm talking about this law. Should we change this law or should we not change this law? when your all your points are valid, and that is true, and that is good. I'll give you another picture. What happens usually is when you're providing this generous parking supply, you are encouraging people to use or come out with the car. Alternatives have been provided by Salia just mentioned that you can provide a parking space outside, maybe a parking plazas in the outskirts, and pedestrianized all the markets, traditional markets. So that is also a valid point. Uh, so we are basically encouraging people to use their own car. I mean, when some planners say that we should discourage the use of car use and we should uh, encourage public transit systems in the commercial centers. So that is one viewpoint by the different planners, which say by uh, there are always two sides of the coin. So one planners are saying that we should supply parking to accommodate the demand. Another say no, we should not put car supply. That will discourage people's trips, and people will only come out if they need it. There will be less load on the traffic, and people will ultimately either go to the public transit or by the foot, or they will not come to the markets. So that is another viewpoint, by the way. So these are already out there, and different debates already being generated. An alternative, another is that the middle ground, which another is proposed, is that okay, we should give parking spaces, but the fees or the parking fees should be very high. That people who can pay for the fees, they need to come on the road. So you need to provide parking meters. So or have some kind of like increased hourly level fees. So these are basically measures to reduce congestion on the roads, and these are used, by the way. Okay, so ultimately, so these are we are stuck in uh, in the cycle of automobile. Yes, Salia, you wanted to say something? Okay, can you hear me, guys?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Yes, sir. We can hear.
Okay. So nowadays, because of the population expansion, that of course your world automobile production has increased. A lot of things have increased. Now look at another temporal data in which it shows that how transportation has increased. Like people with no house, no car has decreased to 10% as compared to 20% in the, let's say, last 50 years in America. And people who had one car have decreased, and people who have two cars have increased because of the employment patterns. Both members, male and female, are working. They have jobs, so both of them have cars. So in America, this has increased. So car ownership has increased. Per car household has increased. Now, another I would say, yes. So another thing is that if there is a car ownership, then if more cars per people is available, your people will use less transit for their work trips. So that is the data uh, being saying that if car ownership increased, then automatically your public transit system will be used less. But on the other hand, it has been proven that your GDP and your cars per capita has a very strong relationship association, I would say. So that is also been true to some extent. But we need to know that okay, that economic development has its consequences. The car having a car per population is directly proportional to the GDP. But we need to consider that if we are promoting GDP or economic development, we are then uh, I would say we are forgetting the consequences or the impacts of these transportation. So of course, these will cars using this car will have damages to the social development, also environmental damages. It would be there, and we'll go into them in a later slides. Uh, then is ultimately your transit system is automatically, it's catering to the needs of the city center, right? So these, then employment center is not only in the city center, it is also in the outskirts, for example, industries and everything. So people need to have cars. So this inequality, spatial inequalities, these also encourage the use of cars. And just like we've talked about spatial inequality in the previous slides, having an automobile, it increases your economic opportunities. If you are, okay, this is the description. I'll give you description. I'll stay with the figure. So here, um, your like having you have an economic opportunity, E1, E2, and E3. So a person with car, he or she can avail all three different types of economic opportunities. Whereas a person who does not have a car can only avail the economic opportunity E1 because maybe it has a public transit system is there. So theoretically, it is saying that it is said that the people with cars will have more economic opportunities. Okay, how do we uh, this is the explanation, you can see to it. Okay, how do we know that our cities have become automobile dependent? How do we uh, I would say assess that our cities have become automobile dependent? Well, people or different studies have been conducted in which people have analyzed that this indicator describe if our cities are dependent. Now, per capita ownership. So, okay, before I start with this, I would say that do you think we are automobile dependent cities in Pakistan? Are we automobile dependent? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good answer. Salia?
नो सर, आई थिंक अगर हम इस तरह देखें कि कितनी कार्स पर पर्सन है, तो वो तो बहुत लेस है पाकिस्तान में पर थाउजेंड की पॉपुलेशन के हिसाब से. इट वाज
Mm,
समथिंग अराउंड 17 कार्स पर थाउजेंड पर्सन. तो
mhm,
ऑल्दो हमारी रोड्स का ट्रांसपोर्टेशन सिस्टम इज सच कि हमें लगता है कि ट्रैफिक कंजेशंस बहुत ज़्यादा हैं, but people aren't population wise still aren't that much car dependent.
mm. Okay, so that figure is, I think, at Pakistan level. So I'm talking about urban level. So okay, maybe urban level we have 100, 200. But okay, so just saying, my point here is that we cannot say yes they are dependent or no they are not dependent. We need to have some kind of methodology to assess something, right? So people have developed different kind of indicators, and those indicators, some of these I will discuss them. Now, these indicators are relative, might be true, might not be true, and you might need to customize according to your own country as well. So, well, the first is vehicle ownership. How many people in your city is owning a car? So, if it is more than 450, then it is highly dependent. How many people are using cars for travel purposes? Right? Okay, some people do have cars, but they do not. In let's say European cities, some cities people have cars, but they do not travel within the city. They only take out the car when they need to go to another city or they have to have some kind of a long trips. So that is there. Then number of trips being generated. How many trips are there? So that would ultimately help us in defining that is it our car is automobile dependent or not. So this is another indicator for car ownership per thousand. So relatively, I some cities would be car oriented and some will not be. In Pakistan, okay, according to 2015 figure, we have 17. So relatively to the world, we are not car dependent. Relative to the world, but if we break it down between urban, rural, different urban areas of Pakistan, then we can maybe come up with a better on our own. We say that okay, Islamabad is more dependent than as compared to Lahore, and Lahore is more dependent to car as compared to Karachi. So if we have the enough data, then we can have a relative analysis at national level as well. Okay, number of registered cars. Okay, so we have the data for that as well, but we don't have the data for quality of trans. Okay, so if the quality, can you hear me, guys? I think I lost you for for a second.
Yes, sir. Distortion.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so last thing which you heard was, oh, okay. So let's talk about quality then. Okay, so quality of transportation alternatives. Again, it's a very relative term that we can also define some indicators: convenience, speed, comfort, affordability. We can measure them using some kind of scale or some indicators. So depending on that, we can say that if the alternative modes are of not good quality, then people will automatically go for automobile dependency. People who cannot drive, how they are disadvantaged. People who do not know how to drive, are they availing the same opportunities given to the people who can drive? So ultimately, that is we can map it, we can analyze it as well. I mean the then market distortions, how people are biased towards use of automobile. So we can have kind of analysis for that as well. Land use patterns, of course, is it dispersed, homogeneous, compact? What kind of pattern it is? We can analyze it. So one more thing, that we cannot use only one indicator and say that we are automobile dependent or not. We need to simultaneously check all these indicators to come up with an overall picture of automobile dependency. So just taking one indicator is kind of very although one indicator is a true is can partially reflect the situation, but the more the indicators we have, more precise or accurate our result can be. So automobile model split, how many people use it, how people travel to work, and then performance indicators are there. We can generate performance indicators as well. Okay. Then this is the issue of the car requirement. Uh, it has been stated if car ownership is land or vice versa, we can say the parking requirement is minimal, then car ownership will decrease. If we are not providing parking spaces, your car ownership will decrease. This is evidence from the Asian cities. So yeah, that is there. Okay, so depending upon, we've talked about that from automobiles are good, they're also bad. So what are the bad impacts? What are the bad impacts? So we have social problems, loss of communities, neighborhood, loss of public safety is there, isolation of remote communities in the suburbs, accessibilities for people who cannot drive or have certain special needs. Uh, Sometimes people, I have said, because of disassociation is observed. People living in suburbs or having their own cars, they have not a lot of social interactions as compared to people living in a high dense areas. So that is linked to the cars as well. Enforced car ownership in lower income, sometimes because of status symbols, and physical and mental health problems as well associated with cars. Okay, economic problem is congestion cost, something which we are overlooking. That how much are we wasting fuels and time if you are having a congestion on roads. High urban infrastructure costs. Usually your water and sewers are below the roads, so overhauling them or upgrading them, maintaining them, have a very high urban infrastructure cost. Loss of productive land, loss of urban land is being converted to pavement. Transit recovery is minimal if you are automobile dependent. Then you're ultimately, if you're not using public transport system, it will degrade over time. Then we will just blame, no, look at this system, it is so bad. It is bad because we are not using it and we are not making it economically viable, and it will become worse and worse. Economic women costs of accidents and traumas, that's relatively, of course, accidents, road accidents are highest as compared to the other public transit systems. Uh, it is also, I think, considered as one of the highest. Its road damages are cause of unnatural deaths among young people. Is the highest in the world, I think, or near to almost highest. Uh, yes, so then cities' wealth is spent on public infrastructure instead of working for the public welfare. We are working on passenger transportation. We are spending wealth on that, and then due to health cost is also associated because people will not travel by foot, and ultimately that would kind of give you a very uh, poor lifestyle, living lifestyle. So that is there. So this car ownership can uh, increase unhealthy habits. In I've seen in European, you have seen that they are very much healthy. Why they are healthy? Because governments have provided that they need to walk, and when they are walking, their health is improving, and they are using public transportation systems. So their movement, physical movement, is great in those countries. Okay, then environmental problems are there: urban sprawl, smoke, rain, traffic, yes, climate change. These kind of things are there. So noise, visual pollution, noise pollution are often underestimated or underreported. That is there. So that causes environmental problems as well. And over time, your systems, transit system will deteriorate, and that will also pose us environmental threat. So that is for today's lecture. So ultimately, do you think that we have segregated people into smoking and non-smoking zones? So can we now segregate between them into driving and non-driving zones? So that's a food for thought. So that's all. So thank you, class. So now I would say if anyone has any questions, please do ask. Any questions regarding car automobile dependency? I think that was a very generic, straightforward lecture. But still, if you have any confusion, no? Okay, I'll stop the recording.